The autumn wind howled across the empty stretch of Highway 191 as Marcus Thompson gripped the steering wheel of his pickup truck. The sun was setting behind the Chiricahua Mountains, painting the Arizona desert in shades of orange and purple. He had been driving for 6 hours straight, returning from a construction job in Tucson, when he noticed something unusual ahead. A figure sat beside a broken-down sedan on the shoulder of the road. As Marcus drew closer, he could see it was a woman, her long black hair blowing in the desert wind. She appeared to be in distress, holding her left arm close to her body. Without hesitation, Marcus pulled over, gravel crunching under his tires. The woman looked up as he approached. She was Native American, perhaps in her 50s, with weathered hands and deep brown eyes that held both pain and wariness. Her arm hung at an odd angle, clearly injured. She wore traditional turquoise jewelry and a faded denim jacket. "Ma'am, are you all right?" Marcus asked, keeping a respectful distance. He had learned from his years working construction in various communities to approach strangers with caution and respect. The woman studied him for a moment before speaking. "My car broke down 3 hours ago. I fell when I was checking the engine and hurt my arm. No cell service out here." Her voice carried the slight accent of someone who spoke another language first. Marcus glanced at the old sedan. Steam rose from under the hood, and he could see a puddle of coolant beneath the vehicle. "That arm looks broken. We need to get you to a hospital. The nearest one is in Douglas, about 40 minutes from here." She shook her head slowly. "I cannot afford a hospital. I was heading to my sister's house in Portal. She knows about healing." Marcus understood the situation immediately. He had worked with many Native American families over the years and knew that medical bills could be crushing for people without insurance. He also respected their traditional healing methods, having seen their effectiveness firsthand. "Let me at least drive you to your sister's place," he offered. "Portal isn't far off my route home anyway." The woman hesitated, clearly weighing her options. Trust didn't come easily on this isolated stretch of road, especially for a woman alone. But the pain in her arm was evident, and darkness was approaching quickly. "My name is Maria Yazzie," she said finally. "I appreciate your kindness." Marcus helped her gather a small bundle of belongings from her car and carefully assisted her into his truck. She winced as she settled into the passenger seat, cradling her injured arm. As they drove, Maria shared that she was Apache from the San Carlos Reservation and had been visiting relatives in Tucson when her old car finally gave up. The conversation flowed naturally despite their different backgrounds. Maria told him about her work as a traditional healer and teacher, preserving old ways for younger generations. Marcus shared his own story of growing up poor in rural Colorado and building his construction business from nothing. As they wound through the mountain roads toward Portal, Marcus noticed Maria studying him intently. She seemed to be assessing something beyond the obvious kindness of a stranger helping someone in need. "You have good energy," she said quietly as they neared the small community of Portal. "Pure intentions. That's rare these days." Marcus felt uncomfortable with the compliment. He had simply done what anyone should do for a person in need. When they arrived at a small adobe house, surrounded by desert plants and wind chimes, an elderly woman emerged. This was Maria's sister, Elena, who immediately took charge of caring for Maria's injury. Elena thanked Marcus profusely and invited him to stay for dinner, but he politely declined. He had a long drive ahead and needed to be at a job site early the next morning. As he prepared to leave, Maria approached him one final time. "Your kindness tonight will not be forgotten," she said, pressing something small into his hand. He looked down to see a small, carved stone, warm to the touch and etched with symbols he didn't recognize. Marcus tried to return it, but Maria insisted. "Keep this. It will protect you on your journeys." She paused, studying his face again with those penetrating brown eyes. "We believe that acts of genuine kindness create connections that span beyond what we can see. Tonight, you have created such a connection." Marcus thanked her and carefully placed the stone in his shirt pocket. As he drove away, he could see the two sisters silhouetted in the doorway, watching his departure. Something about Maria's final words stayed with him during the long drive home to his small house outside Benson. He arrived home near midnight, exhausted from the long day. After parking his truck, he noticed nothing unusual about his property. The front door looked the same as always, with its familiar scratches and weathered blue paint. Inside, he placed Maria's gift stone on his kitchen table and fell into bed, quickly drifting off to sleep. The October wind continued to howl outside his windows all night, carrying with it the sounds of the desert and perhaps something else entirely. In his dreams, Marcus found himself walking through a vast landscape of red rocks and ancient symbols, guided by a figure whose face he couldn't quite see. The dream felt incredibly real, more like a memory than imagination. When morning came, Marcus would discover that his encounter with Maria had set in motion events that would challenge everything he thought he knew about chance, destiny, and the invisible connections that bind people together across cultures and time. Marcus woke to the sound of his alarm at 5:30 in the morning, groggy from the vivid dreams that had filled his sleep. As he stumbled toward the kitchen to make coffee, something caught his eye through the window. His front door looked different somehow, though he couldn't immediately identify what had changed. After brewing his coffee, Marcus stepped outside to load his truck for the day's work. That's when he saw it clearly for the first time. Carved deep into the wooden surface of his front door were symbols he had never seen before. The markings appeared fresh, the exposed wood still pale against the weathered blue paint. The symbols were intricate and purposeful, not random scratches or vandalism. There were 4 distinct marks arranged in a diamond pattern, each about the size of his palm. The carvings looked ancient, like something that might be found on petroglyphs in the desert. Yet they had definitely not been there when he arrived home the previous night. Marcus examined the door more closely, running his fingers over the deep grooves. The symbols had been carved with precision and skill, not hastily scratched. Someone had taken considerable time and effort to create these markings. But who could have done this in the middle of the night without waking him? His first thought was of vandalism. But these symbols didn't feel malicious. They seemed meaningful, almost ceremonial. As he studied them, Marcus remembered Maria's words about connections that span beyond what we can see. He pulled the carved stone from his pocket, the one she had given him, and noticed that it bore similar markings to those now on his door. Feeling unsettled but not entirely frightened, Marcus took photographs of the symbols before heading to his construction site. Throughout the day, he found it difficult to concentrate on his work. His crew noticed his distraction as he measured lumber incorrectly twice and nearly dropped a power saw. During his lunch break, Marcus drove to the local library in Benson and used their internet to research Native American symbols. After an hour of searching, he found references to similar markings in Apache spiritual traditions. The symbols appeared to be related to protection, guidance, and spiritual connections between people. One article mentioned that certain Apache families maintained ancient traditions of marking the homes of those who had performed significant acts of kindness for tribal members. The markings were said to ensure protection and good fortune for the marked individual and their family. Marcus felt a chill reading this information. The timing seemed too coincidental. He had helped Maria just hours before these symbols appeared on his door. But how could she have traveled from portal to his house, carved these intricate symbols in the darkness, and returned home without being detected? That evening, Marcus called his neighbor, Mrs. Henderson, an elderly woman who lived across the street and was known for her insomnia and vigilant watch over the neighborhood. She often sat by her window late into the night, observing any unusual activity. "Did you see anyone around my house last night?" Marcus asked her over the phone. Mrs. Henderson paused thoughtfully. "Now that you mention it, I did see something unusual. Around 3 in the morning, there was this strange light coming from your front yard. It wasn't bright like a flashlight, more like moonlight, but the moon was covered by clouds all night. Did you see any people or vehicles?" "That's the odd thing," she replied. "I watched for about 10 minutes, and I never saw anyone. Just that soft light moving around your front door area. I figured you were checking on something outside, but now I'm curious what you were doing out there so late." Marcus thanked her and hung up, more puzzled than ever. He examined the door again as darkness fell, noting details he had missed earlier. The symbols appeared to have been carved with tools that left unusually smooth edges, unlike the rough marks that modern knives or chisels would create. Unable to sleep, Marcus spent the evening researching Apache traditions online. He learned about the concept of spirit guides and the belief that significant spiritual events could manifest in the physical world. Some Apache traditions spoke of healers and spiritual leaders who could travel great distances through means that transcended ordinary understanding. The more he read, the more Marcus began to question his rational explanations for what had occurred. He had always been a practical man, believing in what he could see, touch, and understand through logic. But the symbols on his door challenged those beliefs. Around midnight, Marcus was startled by a knock at his door. When he opened it, he found a young Native American man, perhaps 25 years old, standing on his porch. The man wore modern clothes but carried himself with the dignity and presence that Marcus had noticed in Maria. "Mr. Thompson, my name is David Yazzie. Maria Yazzie is my grandmother. She sent me to speak with you." Marcus invited David inside, offering him coffee and a seat at the kitchen table. The young man noticed the carved stone sitting where Marcus had left it and nodded approvingly. "My grandmother told me about your kindness last night," David began. "She also told me about the markings that would appear on your door. She wanted me to explain what has happened, because she knew you would be confused." Marcus leaned forward, eager for answers. How did she know about the markings before they appeared? And how were they created? David smiled gently. "My grandmother is what you might call a traditional healer, but her gifts go beyond herbal medicine. She has connections to the spiritual world that most people have lost. When someone shows genuine kindness to our people, especially in a moment of true need, it creates what we call a spiritual debt." "A spiritual debt? Not a debt that requires repayment?" David clarified. "Rather, a connection that allows the spirit world to offer protection and guidance to the person who showed kindness. The markings on your door are a sign of this protection. They were not carved by human hands." Marcus struggled to process this information. His rational mind rejected the supernatural explanation, yet he could find no logical alternative for what had occurred. "I know this is difficult to accept," David continued. "My grandmother expected that. She asked me to tell you that over the next several weeks, you will experience events that will help you understand the reality of connections that exist beyond the physical world." As David prepared to leave, he paused at the door, studying the carved symbols. "These particular markings indicate that your act of kindness has created a bond between you and our family that will span generations. My grandmother wants you to know that you will always have friends among our people, and that the protection these symbols provide is real." After David departed, Marcus sat alone in his kitchen, staring at the carved stone and trying to make sense of everything he had been told. The symbols on his door seemed to pulse with their own energy in the moonlight, and for the first time since discovering them, Marcus felt a sense of peace rather than confusion about their presence. Over the following weeks, Marcus began to notice subtle changes in his life that seemed to validate David's predictions about protection and guidance. The first incident occurred just 3 days after the symbols appeared on his door. Marcus was working on a roof renovation when his ladder suddenly shifted on loose gravel. He should have fallen 20 feet onto concrete, but somehow he managed to catch himself on the roof's edge with reflexes that surprised even him. His crew members said it looked like something had pushed him back towards safety at the last moment, though no one else was on the roof. A week later, Marcus narrowly avoided a head-on collision when his truck's engine mysteriously stalled at an intersection just as a drunk driver ran the red light at high speed. The engine restarted immediately after the danger passed, despite showing no mechanical problems when examined by his mechanic. These incidents might have been dismissed as coincidence, but they were accompanied by other unusual occurrences. Marcus began having remarkably vivid dreams that seemed to provide guidance for decisions in his waking life. In one dream, he saw himself taking a different route to a job site, which led him to discover a water leak in the building's foundation that the owners didn't know existed. Finding and fixing the problem saved the building from extensive damage and earned Marcus a substantial bonus. The most significant change came when Marcus received an unexpected phone call from a tribal representative of the San Carlos Apache Reservation. They had heard about his construction skills and his respectful interactions with Native American communities. The tribe was seeking a contractor for a major housing project, and they wanted to interview Marcus for the job. The project would be the largest contract of Marcus's career, worth more than he typically earned in 2 years. During his interview at the reservation, Marcus met with a council of tribal elders that included Maria Yazzie. Her arm had healed well, and she greeted him with a warm smile that seemed to convey deep satisfaction about how events had unfolded. "You see," she told him after the formal interview concluded, "kindness creates circles that eventually return to their source. The protection you received was payment for the kindness you showed. Now that kindness continues to grow, creating new opportunities." Marcus was awarded the contract, and over the months that followed, he worked closely with tribal members to construct affordable housing that respected traditional Apache architectural elements. The project introduced him to a rich culture he had never fully appreciated, and he formed friendships that enriched his life in ways he couldn't have imagined. During the construction project, Marcus learned more about the symbols on his door. An elderly Apache craftsman named Thomas explained that the markings represented the 4 directions, the connection between earth and sky, protection during travel, and the blessing of ancestors. Thomas also told him that such markings typically faded over time, as their spiritual purpose was fulfilled. But sometimes, Thomas added with a knowing look, when the connection between people is particularly strong, the markings become permanent, passing their protection to future generations of the family. As winter approached, Marcus noticed that the symbols on his door had not faded. If anything, they seemed more defined, as though they were becoming a permanent part of the wood itself. He had grown fond of them, no longer seeing them as mysterious intrusions but as reminders of the unexpected connections that could form between people from different backgrounds. The housing project concluded successfully just before Christmas, and the tribal council held a ceremony to celebrate its completion. Marcus was honored as a friend of the Apache people, and given a traditional blanket woven with patterns that matched the symbols on his door. Maria Yazzie spoke at the ceremony, telling the assembled crowd about the night her car broke down and how Marcus's simple act of kindness had led to lasting friendship between their communities. She explained how his respectful approach to their culture during the construction project had ensured that the new homes would serve their families well for generations. "Some people believe that chance encounters are just accidents," Maria said, her voice carrying across the gathering. "But we know that when people act with pure hearts, the spirits guide them to where they need to be." Marcus Thompson was guided to that dark road not by accident, but because his character made him worthy of the connection that would form between our peoples. After the ceremony, Marcus and Maria walked together to see the completed homes. Children were already playing in the yards, and families were moving their belongings into houses that would provide safe, affordable shelter for decades to come. "Do you still question what happened that night?" Maria asked, as they watched the families settling into their new homes. Marcus considered her question carefully. 6 months ago, he would have insisted on logical explanations for everything. Now, after experiencing the chain of events that had transformed his life, he had gained a deeper appreciation for mysteries that couldn't be easily explained. "I've learned that some things don't need to be fully understood to be accepted," he replied. "What matters is that your broken-down car led to friendships, opportunities, and homes for people who needed them. Whether that happened through spiritual connections or remarkable coincidences doesn't change the good that came from it." Maria smiled and nodded approvingly. "You have grown wise, my friend. Understanding this truth will serve you well in the years ahead." As Marcus drove home that evening, he reflected on how dramatically his life had changed since that windy October night. He had gained not only professional success but a broader perspective on the interconnectedness of human experiences. The symbols carved into his door no longer seemed mysterious but felt like a daily reminder to remain open to unexpected connections and to approach others with the same kindness he had shown Maria. When he arrived home, Marcus paused to touch the symbols on his door before entering his house. They felt warm under his fingertips, as though they retained some energy from their mysterious creation. Inside, he placed his ceremony blanket on the kitchen table next to Maria's carved stone, creating a small shrine to the friendship that had begun with a simple act of helping a stranger in need. Years later, When visitors noticed the unusual symbols on his door and asked about their meaning, Marcus would tell them the story of the night he helped a hurt Apache woman on an isolated road. He would explain how that single act of kindness had led to lasting friendships, professional opportunities, and a deeper understanding of the connections that bind all people together. The symbols never faded from Marcus's door. And according to Apache tradition, they never would. They had become a permanent blessing, ensuring that the kindness he had shown would be remembered and that the protection they provided would extend to his family for generations to come. The mystery of their creation remained unsolved, but Marcus had learned that some mysteries were more meaningful when left unexplained, serving as reminders that there are forces in the world that operate beyond human understanding, always working to reward genuine kindness and create connections between people who might otherwise never have met.